Hello, Professor.
Hi there.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well, doing well. Going to teach a class this morning after we get off the podcast. But very excited to talk to you.
Great.
That's great. That's great. Awesome. So I guess we're ready to begin. Very nice to meet you. Can we call you like Professor Sacerdote or
Exactly,
like
that's
am I
perfect. Yes, yes.
all right, all right, all right. That's good. So I guess we can kick off. By the way, don't you mind that we're recording the meeting for like later like to post it on socials on our
Of
socials?
course, yes, of course. Yeah, I would be.
Thank you.
I would be a strange guest if I objected to the recording of a podcast.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much.
Uh-huh. And I'm
We're
just,
ready to kick off.
if you're wondering what I'm doing, I'm just opening one of the papers that you had asked about, so that I have it at my fingertips. So go
All
ahead.
right, sure,
Yes.
sure. Um, dear listeners of the podcast, it's Silk Road Revival podcast series. So our guest today is Bruce Sacerdote, the professor of economics at Dartmouth College. His research centers on peer effects, education, child and youth outcomes, labor markets, and the economics of crime, typically using rich data and natural experiments. He's a research associate at the National Bureau of Economic Research, which includes programs of education, economics of education, law and economics, children and families, and political economy as well. He earned his BA from Dartmouth and PhD in economics from Harvard, which is quite impressive, to be honest. Um, about the agenda today. So we have three parts. In the first part, we will ask you some personal and work-related questions to get to know you and your works better. In the second part, we will focus on one of your research works, which is Will the Stork Return to Europe and Japan? Understanding fertility within developed nations. And then we will move to the third part, where we will discuss the work of the economic approach to social capital. So it's going to be interesting. It will take approximately like maximum an hour of your time. Thanks one more time for your contribution. Hello one more time.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, please.
Sure.
Looking forward to talking.
Um, sure. Dear professor, my first question would be, what first drew you to the field of economics? Was there some open eyes moment when you understood that this is exactly what you want to be doing for the rest of your life?
Yeah, that's a great question. And as an undergraduate, the first thing that turned me on to economics was the idea that there are all these things that make the world go round, like interest rates and GDP growth and labor markets. And it seemed like a big mystery as someone who hadn't taken economics before, but then beginning to understand that these things actually fit together. And even though we can't always predict what's going to happen, economics can give us a much better understanding of why prices move the way they do, why some countries grow more than others, why there's such a large return to education, why not everyone gets more education and enters the occupations where returns are highest. So that was the initial part. There was kind of a second step, which is when I entered to get my PhD. I entered at a very watershed moment for the field. And that I got to know Ed Glazer, who became my advisor in graduate school, and he was brilliant in his ability to combine theory and empirics. But then also on top of that, there were folks like Steve Levitt and Josh Angrist and David Card and Hio Imbens who were beginning an empirical revolution and finding ways to make credible, use all the big data sets that were just emerging then and kind of make credible the estimates that we would get out of those data sets. And so to make economics very useful for policy. So it was kind of, maybe you could break it into understanding why the world works the way it does, but then understanding that we could use data to actually think about making it work better and how we could do that credibly.
Thanks a lot. Very interesting.
So, okay,
Yeah.
my next question would be about the National Bureau of Economic Research, which you have affiliated many times. So it
Yes.
brings economists across different fields of economics, and it's quite popular among researchers. So my question is, what does it uniquely enable in your research process? Could you please tell
Yeah,
about this?
that's a good question. And if Jim Paterba, the head of the Bureau, were here, he could give you a economists and researchers, not just economists, but researchers in all of the major subfields. And as a result, and it's very close to Cambridge, so it's very close to Dartmouth being in Cambridge. And so as a result of that, it enables researchers like me to interact with the top people in my field and to have exchanges with them and co-authorship relationships and find out about data they have and data that I have and look at the techniques they're using and the conclusions they're finding. And it's those exchanges really that lead to pushing science forward more than sort of me sitting in my office thinking about this on my own, which that might have some value, but the real value is in the cross-fertilization of ideas across students and faculty.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thanks. So my next question would be like a little audience related. So many listeners of ours are students which are interested in economics and finance. So what daily habits or choices in college actually compound into better academic and career outcomes? And what popular advice do you think is overrated?
Aha. So is this for folks who are thinking about finance or economic research or both potentially?
Yes.
Yeah, I think the most important thing, honestly, in college, because everything has become so pre-professional. So I think, from Dartmouth's perspective, getting a broad education and learning how to interact with other people and work in teams and how to write and how to communicate and, how to use AI tools for good. I think those are the most useful things you can do. You do also want to demonstrate some ability in a specific field, and so frankly, getting in addition to getting a broad liberal arts education, having some experience with either internships if you're interested in business or research assistantships if you're interested in research. I think that getting those pieces of experience so you can see what you like and don't like, I think that's the most important thing. So a combination of keeping your education broad, and having some fun and enjoying what you do, and then also having jobs specifically within fields where you think you might like to work to find out if you enjoy that. Because ultimately, I think that a lot of what we're doing with education is trying to build human capital, but really what that opens up are the possibilities for you to choose something that you really enjoy. It opens up choices, and so then you can choose something where you think you can really contribute and you enjoy it. And so that's in part what we're about.
Yep, here I have a follow-up question, if I may. So, basically, you're saying that like doing an internship is good. It's basically for business, but there are people like me who are interested, like specifically in economics. So,
Yes.
what can we do? Like, there are possibilities to like work in the government, in some ministry, but it's too hard. It's too hard to get in. So, what are the interesting ways to engage with the field of economics specifically are there,
Yes.
except of research and like this?
Yes. So honestly, the best way to engage is through research. And so approach your faculty, approach economists that you've heard of, that you know. Ideally, since I believe so strongly in interpersonal one-on-one interactions, despite this being the era of Zoom, in an ideal world, you would work closely with researchers who are physically located near you that you could go and talk to every day, and find out what their research program is and how you might be able to contribute to that. And in an ideal world, it'd be something you're already interested in. But frankly, if you have the opportunity to work on research, you might develop an interest in that topic anyway. And that's really what it's all about. It's all learning on the job. I mean, graduate school is important, but ultimately, graduate school gives you a lot of the basic tools in micro theory and econometric theory that you'll need. But at the end of the day, so much of this is apprenticeship and learning, working with economists and learning what they do and deciding that you like it and then doing that yourself. So in many ways, it's very straightforward, and it's perfectly analogous to what I would say on the business side too. I think what we do is conceptually can be more difficult, but it's the same idea. That it requires somewhat more formal training. What we do requires somewhat more formal training, but it's like you want to work in that field, you go work with someone in that field, and work as hard and as fast as you can, and See if you like it.
Thanks.
All right, thank you. And my
Are
next
you both
question.
university students, by the way? I didn't even ask this.
Yes, I am a university student. I'm a freshman, and Safar is a high school student, senior.
Fantastic.
The
How did
last year of high school.
You're in the last year of high school. How did you two meet? Did you go to the same high school?
No. Like we're just friends. We met up. Like we have a joint friend of ours.
I
That
see.
kind of
Connected you.
yeah.
That's great.
Like yeah.
And are you both in the same city? Where are you located?
Yep.
Yes.
Sure. In Tashkent.
Excellent. Excellent. Good. All right. What else can I tell you? What else should we? What else
So my next question will be about choosing the paper, choosing the topic. So can you give
Yes.
a concrete example when, for example, your paper in a project went, for example, and slowed down? How did you navigate it? Did you change the topic, the
Yeah.
approach, or something?
That's a really good question because if you think about us as prospecting for new information or new findings, we dig a lot of dry holes, right? Like there's not both because it turns out that what you're doing is similar to what's been done before, or the data aren't there, or the data are just so noisy that you cannot you cannot learn as much as you hope to learn. That happens constantly. That happens more often than not. And so I honestly think the best approach is you want to investigate. Of course, you want to plan the project really well so that in an ideal world, no matter what you find, it's going to be interesting, and that you've got so much data that you're high powered to ask the empirical questions you want to ask. But at the end of the day, if the data are not there, or you thought that there was some kind of quasi-randomization into a treatment or into a government program and it's not there, I think at some point you want to give up. You kind of want to investigate, set yourself a bunch of goals like, okay, if we have this much data and this many people who are treated, just to put it in the language of as if it were a natural experiment or an explicit experiment. Look, we're going to need to have this many people who are treated in order to be able to have statistical power. If you don't have that, you may want to give up. If it turns out the data are noisy, you may want to give up. Or if it turns out that there's massive selection into treatment, you may want to give up. So, you set yourself up to work on projects that are going to have a lot of statistical power and the ability to answer an important question. But at the end of the day, it doesn't always happen, right? And so I guess in that case, then let it not happen quickly so that you can work on something else.
Yeah, definitely, because like much research takes years of time, and
Yes,
obviously the motivation could shrink up. And yeah,
yes, you got it. That's exactly right.
thank you.
So my next question would be about choosing the research topic. So basically, choosing questions is a scarce time problem. And what filters do you apply when picking projects? So is it social value, identification strengths, or data access maybe? And
It's the
how do
concept.
you weigh them?
Yes, it's the constellation of all those things. And so I don't really know how I weight them. I think that honestly, they have to have all those components. And so you would have to have to do a project that's not well identified, you would have to have very strong social value. So it would have to be like, look, we need to know this correlation, even if it's not causal or if it's not caused by the program, right? And so by and large, most projects need to have all those elements. They need to have very convincing identification. Um, I would like to have social value, significant social values, the answer to the question. And of course, you're going to need data. And so it can start from any of those points, like, oh, I've got this great data set. Is there any source of identification in it? Or here's an obvious source of identification. Kind of got a great data set to go with it. It can run in either direction. For me, it has run in either direction, where some data come my way. A lot of times I pick up a source of identification and then I spend a lot of time thinking about, okay, who would have the data for that? How would we get data?
Yeah, great.
Got it.
So here's the follow-up. What research questions are you most excited about to explore in the future? Do you have
Yes.
some
So
in mind?
one of the ones, I've got two right now. There's a whole lot of things that I am excited about. I've got two that I'm really eager to start, and I cannot start until I finish my existing projects. and one of them is looking at the value of high school athletics to long run college going and earnings. Because in the U.S. we spend so much time on athletics. We spend youth sports is a very big deal in the U.S. And other than watching YouTube videos and posting on Instagram, it's the number one thing that young people do is get involved in extracurricular activities and sports and such. So understanding how that might correlate, we've got some different instruments for how much people participate in those things, and then asking how that leads to their college going, college success, occupations and things. So I'm very excited about this. Is youth sports a big deal in your country? Do you all are sports a really big deal for you all, high school teams?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yes. No, like, look, it's not a big deal for the high schools,
Right.
because like we're not that much engaged, to be honest. Like if we have, let's say, 50 or 60 classes per week, like only one is like physical exercise,
Yep.
basically.
Yep. Exactly.
So we're quite limited in the high school, but like most of the people in Uzbekistan are into football and basketball,
Yeah.
and they go, they like create some communities, they go and play together, or they like hire a coach as well.
Yep.
So
Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah. So like club sports.
yeah,
And
kind of.
so that may be, while it's sad that it's not organized by the school, it may be that you get better coaching. Maybe it's better organized because it's an outside organization. So that's good. And are these clubs, are they organized at sort of the province level or anything, or it's basically just a bunch of private clubs that play each other without
No,
geography?
without it is just bunch of clubs, I would say.
Yeah. So it's not like each province has there's no none of it relates to any of the governmental structures. It's not like each province has a league and then within the league there's districts or whatever. Yeah, I got you.
Yeah,
No,
not really.
Yeah. Well, that sounds great. Are the games at the schools or they're never at the schools?
Like out of schools, mostly out of schools.
Yeah. Perfect.
So basically, like, yeah, the governments, they just organize the competitions. Like, if we take the international level, so they organize the competitions. But the thing is, they do not prepare you for that,
Right.
like at schools. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
I got you. Yep.
like, if you want to, you can work on yourself, like, as much as you want, and then like you compete one time in a year at your school, and then if you're if you're too good, you can proceed to the next stage, basically.
I see. Yep. I got you. Yep. So that's one of my big questions. And my other one is asking broadly. So in the U.S., and this is somewhat less true in Europe, but in the U.S., there are lots of high-paying occupations that are undersupplied by labor. And so, the question that we're asking in that paper is, which are those occupations? And if you happen to live near a place that has training for it, are you more likely to go into it? And if we were going to advise or steer young people towards occupations, what advice would we give them? And so it's kind of understanding the mismatch between the supply and demand for these occupations that have consistently been higher paying than others. Like HVAC technician, radiologist technician, nurse, things like that. Some of these things have occupational barriers to entry, so you can to some degree understand why they're undersupplied. But other things have fewer barriers, and it just seems to be the labor market doesn't fully clear. It's kind of how my co-authors and I are thinking about it. Yeah. What else can I tell you?
So that's basically the end of the part one. It's really interesting, and now we will move to the discussion of one of your research works, which is will the stork return to Europe and Japan and understand its fertility within developed nations? So first, I will briefly explain the context of work, its results, and then we will move to the questions. So yeah.
Excellent.
So rich countries like Japan, Italy, and Spain have had very low birth rates for decades. And this paper that we took, asks why and whether birds can bounce back. Professor Sacerdote and two other co-authors show it's not simply careers versus kids. Fertility falls when women enter paid work but still carry almost all the housework and childcare. The second shift, where men, at the same time, where men meaningfully share the home load and policies make work and family compatible, birth rates are higher and often recover. Think of Scandinavia and some parts of the United States. The old negative link between women's employment and fertility has flipped, and more gender equality now goes with more babies. And the big takeaway here, I would say that if you want the stork, the so-called stork, to return, it's needed to redesign time at home and support parents, not just the labor market. So this question, like I found it extremely interesting to be honest. I hope that I presented it good, adequately. I really hope so. And I guess we can move to the questions. Professor Sacerdote, what first motivated you to study the collapse of birth rates in rich countries and specifically to test whether men's share of housework and shifting gender norms could flip the old careers versus kids trade off?
Yeah, that's a great question. And really, this was an idea that my co author Jim Firer brought to the fore because he, as a macroeconomist, he's a very accomplished empirical macroeconomist. And he had pointed out to me many times that there is nothing, not just that birth rates have fallen tremendously, but there's no natural force that would drive fertility back above child, two children per woman. Um, and this is a reality, right? There's so many other correcting forces in economics. You know, I pointed out, we were just talking earlier about a study that we're doing on why are these high-paying occupations undersupplied. And there are very much natural forces, that economic forces that will fix that. Fertility, in many ways, is a different story because it's a public good. I think in general, there can be lots of debate over whether a shrinking population is a bad thing for mankind or for our own utility as the people who are here now. I think there's a lot of legitimate debate about that, but more people are kind of on my side thinking that you want economic growth and a shrinking population leads to bad things. Again, debatable, but my view is that the countries, if you think about this at the country level, the countries that are most successful, most dominant, and have the most inventions and highest income growth are not countries that have shrinking populations. So yet there's this social aspect to it. There are real positive spillovers from having young people in your country, both from a tax revenue perspective and from a productivity perspective. And yet it's not a private market, and the private market forces kind of go the other way. And so Fire had pointed this out to me many times, and it's kind of a conundrum. The other thing I'll add, your summary of the paper was excellent. One of the issues, and this gets to, there's an annual conference at the NBER put on by Melissa Carney and Phil Levine, and Melissa Carney's at Notre Dame and Phil Levine is at Wellesley College. And at that annual meeting, we noted this year that fertility continues to decline. So despite the fact that there are sort of what I would call improvements, and Scandinavia is doing better than, say, Austria, that does not mean that, quote unquote, what I'll call problem is solved. Because even in the developed places that have higher fertility, not many are above replacement rate, and some, like the U.S., seem to be getting a little bit farther below replacement rate. And so I find that disturbing, and worth talking about.
Yep, that's an interesting insight I didn't know about. Sorry for that. Yep, got it. So I guess we can move to the next question. So your three-phase story runs from high fertility to low fertility and then to a rebound. Looking across countries, what's the most surprising tipping point you have seen moving a nation from phase two, which is low fertility, to phase three, which is so-called rebound? and a policy. It may be a policy, a norm shift, or an employer practice, maybe a government subsidy. And why did that specific change unlock more birth? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the countries that have done I would say the best, again, I'm using normative language because I believe in having above replacement fertility, or at least replacement fertility rates. So the countries that have been the most successful are the Scandinavian countries, and to a lesser degree France, and then Canada and the US. And I think the things that they've done that have helped, I don't want to say worked because that sort of suggests that quote unquote the problem is solved. Um, but certainly family friendly policies. So family leave in which people can leave the workforce for 9 months or a year or more and return to their jobs. That's very important. And also, honestly, having equal offering paternity leave as well as maternity leave can be very helpful and can establish a norm of both partners sharing childcare responsibilities. So I think that's been a real improvement over the last 30 years. And fine, and there, of course, in some of these countries, there's a payment per child amount, which is helpful in partially offsetting all the financial costs of having a child, in addition to the sort of opportunity costs, the trade-offs. And so all those things put together have made a dent. For the U.S., what has helped in part are some family leave policies, but also immigration policies in which folks coming from other countries, in part Central America and Latin America, have higher fertility rates, and they come to the U.S. and they have workers have greater economic opportunity for job choices, and they bring with them their higher fertility rates, and so that's been helpful for the U.S. So I think all those things have gone in the right direction, and I think that is one reason for American exceptionalism and our higher rates of growth and stock market returns and housing price returns and such, is that growth, that source of growth.
Uh-huh. Got it. Um, so if you were explaining the rebound part idea to a non-economist, let's say, what everyday change that is like usable, that is like you can say that it's changed with 100% confidence. What everyday change inside households flips the script from careers versus kids to careers and kids? And what would families notice first when that shift starts?
Yeah, so it'd be a combination of sharing household duties, and so maybe being more explicit in rather than just having an implicit bargain as to who's going to do what, maybe being explicit about it and sharing it. But honestly, what else has worked in the U.S.? And I didn't talk about childcare. Having subsidies for childcare and more availability for childcare. Child Working as a child care worker in the U.S. is not a high-paying occupation, and so to the extent that we could drive wages up for that, and maybe either lower regulation, change regulations, or um, provide higher compensation for that, perhaps through employers, that would make it easier. And I think that would tend to flip the script and allow people to do both. Another change, of course, one of the things to come out of COVID is an increase in the number of jobs that can be done from home, and that kind of flexibility matters a lot too. So having more flexibility from employers, more subsidies for childcare, and maybe more explicit bargaining within the household to set these parameters makes a big difference. And there are enormous social effects of these things, so people tend to look at their neighbors and their family members and their friends in deciding how many children to have. So um, when you move the needle for one person, it does then boost the fertility of the people around them to a small degree, but those little small pieces add up.
Uh-huh. Got it. So my last question for the part two would be, um, suppose some big employers from developed countries ask for a playbook that raises spurs and retention without cutting the profits. What specific practice would you pilot next quarter, and what would prove that it works?
That's a great question. And in some sense, you're asking for a free lunch. So what could employers do that wouldn't cost them anything? That would, I mean, this is the crux of the problem, right? Which is that employers, in some sense, don't want to and shouldn't have to pay for this because it's of social value. We don't want employers to have a sort of lock or monopoly power over their employees, but because they do not, then if they pay the costs of their workers having children, they're still at equal risk of then losing that employee, 2 months later to a firm that doesn't provide that once they're done, with their childcare. So at the same time, it is possible to envision a scenario where employers are losing profits because they're losing valued employees. And so, if that is the case, then there's scope for them to spend money on childcare subsidies or even offering childcare in the workplace, right? The most obvious concrete thing, and Dartmouth has a childcare center. It needs to be bigger, we've discovered. But childcare, we either need to have a bigger childcare center internal to Dartmouth, or we need to offer larger subsidies for childcare, which we're currently doing. Um, so if doing those things can help retention and it can help firm productivity, there can be a win-win and there can be a free lunch. But if not, then you think like you might want some government help and tax deductions for those childcare subsidies that you provide, right? So I think all those things, and also offering flexible work arrangements. So there may be a free lunch or a win-win. Um, Experienced employees may be more productive if they're allowed to work from home. Either, I don't know whether that's 5 days a week or one day a week, it all depends on the job, but that would be another area where you might be able to find sort of a free lunch. So that would be the thing to try. And then you would measure the productivity of those employees that you offered if there's any change in productivity for those employees or change in retention. And one thing you might do to investigate this empirically is if you could get data on the success and growth of firms and look at the progressivity of their policies around work from home and childcare, and see if it goes the direction that you might hope, which is that the more flexible employers with better benefits are seeing higher growth. Um, and that might indicate that better firms offer these benefits and are more profitable and growing at the same time.
Uh-huh, got it. Thanks a lot, Professor Sacerdote. That's all by me, and now we can move to the work of the folks.
Yeah, thanks so much. I really learned a lot of insights. But I also
Good.
have a question regarding your different paper,
Yes.
which is about the economic approach to social capital.
Yes.
And if you don't mind, I will briefly, like in 1-2 sentences, introduce what is it about, and then we will
Yeah.
proceed to my questions.
Yes.
So,
So, the idea of social capital is the notion, and this has become a very important notion in economics over the last 30 years, and it was pioneered by Gary Becker and others, and Robert Putnam, which is that there is not just human capital and physical capital, human capital being our education and our knowledge, but social capital being the connections we have among people and our ability and willingness to interact with others and our capability to interact with others, and also our trust in the rest of society. And so the economic approach to social capital is to ask, what are the economic forces that cause us to build up more social capital? So are there countries where it makes sense to where trust has been built up for good reasons, and where sort of my level of engagement with other people in society is built up for economic reasons, and so there's a symbiotic relationship between my income and my social capital. That I build social capital because it's good for my income, and then that in fact pays off. So that's the idea behind the economic approach to social capital.
yeah, definitely. I would agree with you, and I would say that the takeaway of this paper is basically that social capital is an intentional, individually chosen investment that people choose,
Yes.
and people allocate time and effort to build relationship when expected returns, such as like information, influence, referrals, exceeds costs. Costs could be like time, distance, and other stuff.
Exactly. That's it. That's it. And so that's why that kind of leads to this virtuous cycle in which high income places often have high incentives to invest in social capital and high payoffs get there. And so there's sort of a virtuous cycle, just the same way that there can be in the building of human capital.
Yeah, definitely. So the question of mine would be, what motivated you to study the social capital this way, and what has changed since you wrote that paper, basically?
Yeah, great question. And I mean, to be quite honest, I was brand new in the field at the time, and Ed Glazer and David Leifson were kind of luminaries in thinking about social capital. And so it was kind of the marriage with the fact that I really enjoyed working with data, and I had a lot of the necessary data at my fingertips, and they wanted to further more deeply investigate social capital and understand what's going on. Of course, I had a budding interest in peer effects at the time, so it seemed like it was a close cousin of peer effects literature, sort of, not traditional but important economic phenomenon. And so that was really the motivation. And this gets back again to Safar's original question, which is like, what does the NBER do? And it's those interactions among researchers that marry different ideas, cross-fertilization of ideas, and data with ideas. And so that was really the motivation. And so I think what has changed over the years is just deeper recognition of the importance of this, and better ways of measuring it. So now there's a very famous set of papers by Raj Chetty and Opportunity Insights, Raj Chetty and Nathan Hendren, and others, using Facebook data. And I measured sort of peer effects and social capital in Dartmouth data using emails among people, the volume of emails across two different people. But in this more modern work, Opportunity Insights is measuring it using Facebook links across people, and finding that the social capital is really important. The social connections between rich and poor kids within the same locality or zip code. And so what's changed is really, really good data that enables you to measure these things, and the effects are even larger than we might have suspected.
Yes, got it. Thank you. So in your paper, you document a rise into middle life and decline later on. So which mechanism best explain this pattern, and what evidence would most convincingly isolate it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is driven by, in the model in the paper, it's driven by the fact that as you get older, the net present value of the payoffs are going to be smaller because you have less time to enjoy it. A competing hypothesis might just be that you're more tired, and so you'd like to do these things, but you sort of don't. And so, how would you separate these things out? I think that you could imagine folks who are like super physically active, but are leaving their careers for other reasons, and then figuring out that looking and seeing whether, so like very well off people who retire early because they're rich, do they invest less in social capital because they don't need to, or in fact, do they invest more because it has pure fun, even though the returns could be lower. So, it's hard to come up with natural experiments that would separate these two stories, but I think that one could do it looking at sort of differential levels of physical activity and differential levels of longer engagement in labor markets.
Yes. I've never thought about this way. Yeah, thank you. So
We need alternative. This goes to say the broader point is that we need alternative hypotheses to explain the pattern, and then try to test them on the alternatives.
yes, definitely. So in your paper, even small increases in distance sharply reduce spontaneous contact and slow trust formation. And that is another pattern that you found out, one of your findings. So digital tools help maintenance, not always deep trust. So in 2025, do online interactions substitute for physical proximity or substitute or complement it, basically? And how would
I think
you
it,
test that?
yeah, I think these things all complement one another. I'm trying to think now. I'm taxing my memory. We had a variety of studies. Ed and I were running a variety of regressions of sort of in-person interaction versus electronic interaction, and it seems to us that these things complement. That email is a technology that enables you to set up in-person interactions as opposed to substitutes for it. Um, and so people sending more emails are also having more interpersonal interaction, and I think that's a good thing. Zoom is in some ways it's a substitute, but it's an imperfect substitute. And so I always try to set up meetings in person when it's possible. Now I'm very glad we had this meeting and it wasn't possible to do it as an in person, but I think that it's still in person is still the best. And what I'm wondering is, do we ever get to a point where um, Zoom or Google Meet interaction is anywhere close to an in-person interaction. That's the thing we don't know the answer to. I think like right now for teaching, to me, it's absolutely certain that in-person teaching, which I'll be doing later this hour, is much better than Zoom teaching. But what I don't know is, do we get to a point where they are very close substitutes? Or even better, because you can do things electronically that you can't do as easily in person. Like if you were working on a data set, in this meeting you could very easily share your screen and everyone could look at it instantaneously. That's somewhat harder to do in person. You can do it, but it's very there's some things that happen, and recording or videotaping a meeting or whatever, right, or getting a transcript. Those things happen more easily electronically. So there is that.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point that you highlighted. Yes, thank you so much. I think you pretty much answered all of my questions.
Wonderful, wonderful. It's so nice to meet both of you. What university do you attend, Prof?
So I attend a local university, which is called New Uzbekistan.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
It's called Uzbekistan, you say?
New Uzbekistan.
New Uzbekistan.
Yep.
And is it located in Uzbekistan?
Yes, in Tashkent city.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Fantastic. And so far, do you think you'll attend that same place?
I don't think so. I guess I will apply abroad. My school is basically sophisticated in learning German language, so I guess I will try my opportunities there and in the US as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I wish you both the best of luck. It's so nice to speak with you about all these things.
Sure.
Hopefully,
Yeah,
Uh,
likewise.
yeah, sure. Professor Sacerdote, thanks a lot for meeting us today. I really was interested in your work about like social capital and everything. I read like how do friendships form. It
yes,
was honestly great because it was like economical but still psychological as well. So,
yes.
and overall, I would like to add a couple of things. Thanks for your engagement, I would say, because the podcast was really interesting for us. Honestly, like you engaged with us with the counter questions, and it was interesting for us to discuss everything with you. So yep, that's basically it. Thanks a lot one more time for your time for your contribution.
Of course, of course. Thank you both for setting this up.
Sure.
Thank you so
Have a, have
much.
a, yeah, yeah. Have a great day. And when the
So,
podcast comes out, shoot me a link. I'd love to listen to it.
Definitely, sure.
sure, definitely. Yep.
Thank,
Bye
thank you both.
bye.
Have a great week.
Have a good rest of your day.
Sure.
Okay, yeah, yeah. Bye now.